everybody. Now that Rogue One has been out in the theater for a few weeks, everyone's been talking about the little details and surprises that we've found in every scene, because as Star Wars fans, what do but analyze every single bit of every scene? So to go even further and hopefully hash out a few more details, I've gathered three of my favorite guys from the Lucasfilm Story Group. So please welcome to the show, Matt Martin, Pablo Hidalgo, and Leland Chee. Let's talk about Rogue One Easter eggs. I'm kind of curious to see what you guys enjoyed. What were your favorite bits?
Matt's got one, but he's biased.
Yeah,
because he's all
I am
over
totally, completely biased. I'm like, I don't want to go first and talk about Chopper.
No, you should.
Yeah.
It's
no, that's one of the biggest ones, especially around here for us. That was what, we were super excited about.
And
Totally.
just the connectivity between Rebels and Rogue One that we've had, it's just been fantastic and a unique opportunity that no one else can do.
Yeah, all of those Rebels connections are huge, but obviously Chopper is the coolest.
So that was why you got to go to set, right? Was to drive Chopper in that scene?
Well, I wasn't there for that. I was actually there because Pablo and I were shooting some BTS stuff that I guess will eventually end up on the Star Wars show, so look out for that. But because I was there at the same time that Chopper was there, and it is our Chopper, like the one that we use on Recon and the one that lives out on the other side of that wall, he was there, and the droid builders and the guys that operate the droid saw me, and they're like, you know how to do this, right? I'm like, yeah. And he hands me the controller, goes off to lunch.
Well, that's awesome.
So how many takes did it take you, Matt?
I don't think I personally messed up any takes. The funniest thing is that, like, it was a really intense scene. I don't know if you remember, but
I
like,
totally remember.
You see it in the movie, and it's like Chopper's on screen, he goes, and then he's gone. But there was 30 extras at least going every which way, and a little transport vehicle driving, and I had to go around this group that's going this way, around this group that's running that way, and then dodge the little car, and then end up under the X-Wing. So I had to do this whole motion a bunch of times, and I was terrified. So I didn't want to mess that up, and I was literally shaking at the beginning. But eventually, I guess that it worked out because it's in the movie still.
Yeah, I was on the other side of the camera behind a bunch of techs only watching Chopper. I knew the pressure was on, so I was kind of rooting for you not to knock over anyone or not to slam into anything. And yeah, I mean, you can't understate how busy that set is. But I will say, by the time we got there and on set, everyone knew Chopper, which was amazing.
That's
like,
cool.
they're working on this big movie, and we've got our Rebels show, and like we're always happy when people acknowledge it, but everyone on the set was like, hey, Chopper, great. So it's really great to see how much Chopper has been embraced as part of the Star Wars universe.
Well, and a lot of fans were so eagerly awaiting seeing what connections between Rebels and Rogue would actually be there. So when, I think it was like a week before the release of the
I was
TV
so sad.
I was so mad. I was so mad. I remember texting you right away, like, what? But as soon as fans saw the ghost, like, blew up.
But you have to be eagle-eyed to catch that.
Our fans are
That's what we're
totally
dealing with
eagle-eyed.
here.
It
Yeah.
ended up in a commercial, and like I told myself, I don't want to spoil anyone's Easter eggs. So like, I got inundated with all these questions. Is it the ghost? Is it the ghost? I'm like, you'll find out soon.
Maybe it's just another VCX 100.
Maybe, you never know. No,
Well,
it's the ghost.
I think my favorite little detail about that was that they actually have the slot empty from where the Phantom
Phantom
jogs.
was, yeah.
Like, everyone was actually really looking for that, and I was like, yes, awesome continuity.
Because of our close collaboration with ILM and Lucasfilm Animation, I mean, we're just a floor apart, really, from the Rogue crew. Dave, myself, a lot of us got roped into the end space battle sequence. And that's how it just, like, the ghost came over. They used the animation model to start off with and really tricked it out to make it photoreal.
Plus, you get that scene with the hammerheads.
Yeah, we got the hammerheads in there.
Super
so-
cool to see the hammerhead.
Yeah, so it's like, if not for Leia bringing in those hammerheads in season 2, the whole Battle of Scarif would have ended up very
Right.
different. The other thing that's in there's a ship in Return of the Jedi that for years was just known as the ROJBG ship. Return of the Jedi background ship, or maybe it's Return of the Jedi Bill George ship, because Bill George, the ILM model maker, built it, right? And he's told me the story. He built it for like a background ship, and Joe Johnston just didn't like it. It's like, whatever. It looks terrible. And so it's barely in Return of the Jedi. But fans always latch on to these little obscure background ships.
Of course, yeah.
So this ship has now been celebrated. The ship that was cast aside and said, it's not very
And
good.
then it was StarWars.com that showed the first images, clear images
Years
of
ago,
that
I found photos of
Yeah.
the model, and so I posted on the website. That became the Dornian gunship. That was his in-universe name. And sure enough, it ends up being fairly prominent in the end space battle because, spoiler, it's going to show up in Rebels as well. So that's another connectivity between the two. We started building that model for Rebels. They translated it into a photoreal version for Rogue. And again, it's this castaway ship that no one likes now is getting its
See, and that's
getting its
another,
due.
that's another fun thing is because everyone was looking for the connections between Rebels and Rogue, and now that Rogue is out, there's probably a ton more that are working backwards that people can now go back and watch for in Rebels.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that's
and
right.
the fact that fans were questioning whether can they do this, whether we'd be able to do this. Of course, we're going to do it. We've been seeding this stuff for years.
That's why, yeah, I mean, a lot of, with Rogue coming out, you'll be able to see a lot of these story threads that, as Leland said, we've been seeding for years. The Kyber crystal stuff,
Geonosis.
yeah, and Saw is all coming together right now. So people finally understand what this is all about. Even the Tarkin Initiative, things like that, like these little elements that all weave together to make this cohesive story.
Does the ghost get away at the end? I keep looking for it and I don't see it.
Well, we don't see every ship that jumps to
Yeah.
hyperspace. I know that one poor Rebel transport sure doesn't make it.
And I think at least one Hammerhead does.
Okay.
Every time I go see it, I've seen it, I think, 9 times in the theater now because I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
And I always try to like take mental note of what does make it out. And I do know that at least a Hammerhead,
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident makes it out. But I don't think you can see the ghost.
I've been trying
Either
to look.
way.
Every single time I've seen it, I've tried to look for the ghost and I haven't seen it. So.
One note about the Hammerheads, people ask about like what happened to the crew on the ship that pushes the Star Destroyer on. John Knoll thought about this, and if you look super carefully, the escape pod bays are empty on the shot of the ship crashing into the shield gate. So perhaps they made it out. But even still, if they made it out, they all got captured by Vader. Anyway, so
Yeah.
whatever. But
Rogue
you know,
One, a Star Wars story, aka everyone dies.
everyone dies.
But they died heroes.
Exactly.
Tell me about Hera's promotion, which was really funny because Kanan mockingly called her General Syndulla in season 2.
That's right. I thought it was going to be kept vague for a while, but then Dave did an interview and he said, "No, that's Hera." I'm like, "Okay, we don't have to be vague about this anymore." So yeah, she is. She's our shining star, and she finally gets the. Well, I mean, she's.
And
always,
that's Matt Wood. Matt Wood asked us, what kind of dialogue would happen over the intercom? We're like, well, maybe they'd call for General Syndulla.
Yeah, that was a lot of. We did that for TFA as well. Matt would send us an email saying we need background chatter, and so we would propose stuff. Leland would propose stuff. I would propose stuff, and there's like some fun stuff. Some that's completely inaudible.
There's
but-
one obscure one that no one has gotten yet that I had suggested with the Dejarik, with the Dejarik. And Matt almost heard it. Matt almost heard it when he says, did I hear right? Did he say who jibs?
Yeah.
I was hoping for who
In
jibs.
Saw's camp, they're playing an analog version of holographic chess. They're
Yeah.
playing Dejarik, and Matt Wood emailed us saying, "What kind of things would people who play Dejarik say?"
And we thought about, would they say Dejarik? It's not like Yahtzee or something where
Yeah.
you say the name of the game, and Pablo dug up this really obscure phrase.
Yeah, I suggest like the 8th Ilfmar Gambit, because apparently that's a move. Yeah.
So-
But it's hard to yell that out
Yeah,
when
no,
you're
it's like,
playing a
"Hey,
game.
yeah,
So,
you said-
so since they're playing Dejarik and all of these pieces have names, we said, well, you know what? Maybe if they did a certain move with the piece or something, maybe they just shout the name of one of those creatures. So they shout Hujix, which is the sort of blue and gold four-legged quadruped creature.
yeah. So it's like yelling like Rook, I got the Rook. You know?
And apparently it's so obscure that no one else has gotten it.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in the fandom for not getting it.
Yeah.
Well, that's because the fandom wants it to be who
Who
jibs.
jibs? Who jibs? The
Me
other
too.
odd thing Matt Wood asked us was, what would a bunch of rebels yell as like a battle cry? I was stumped. I was like, well, it's not. They're not going to yell "Yo," like it's not. It's not.
Well, they also wanted like the Marines,
Yeah, like
oh yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And I was stumped, but then Leland suggested.
That's when they say for Jeddah line.
For Jeddah.
Jeddah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So good call on that.
But we also got the Karabast line in there by Pow.
Yeah, Pow yells Karabast. And again, like we were surprised because I didn't hear it. All I heard was, it's like, because in the script for the longest time,
It's Sakala!
yeah, Pow actually had a line that was Sakala, and because he's just, he's just yelling.
a puppet.
That's all I heard. And then later, someone was asking, "Does he say Karabast?" I'm like, "I don't know." And
have
yeah,
to go
Matt
back
Wood
and listen to
confirmed
it.
that he does say Karabast.
Dave Collins and Sam Witwer are the reason for the TC-15 line that is becoming a running gag now.
The BT-16,
Or the
BT.
BT, TC, or
Yeah,
T,
yeah.
whatever
The two
it actually
stormtroopers
is.
just talking about,
Yeah.
they
It's that
just,
16 thing now, yeah.
yeah, those
So
two
tell me a little
troopers.
bit about the origins of that.
Well, it's in A New Hope. I mean, there's those two stormtroopers while Obi-Wan's fiddling with the tractor beam, and they're talking about the latest Auto Trader that came out or something, you know, and it's like, have you seen the new, and for the years, no one knew what they said because it was never scripted.
I always thought it was T16. That's what I heard.
I always thought it was PT16. Apparently, some closed captions say VC16 or VT16. The annotated screenplays, I think, says BT16. So whatever it is they're talking about, they're just like, yeah, a couple of the other guys were telling
And
me
Westland
about it.
Games had something called the BT16 perimeter droid.
Yeah.
Is that named after that?
I don't know. But now it's like these two guys, these two knuckleheads, apparently get stationed everywhere and talk about the latest thing. Have you heard the latest thing?
One day we'll figure out what that latest thing what
Yeah.
it actually is.
What I love is that, so the first one they're talking about how the 16 is new. And in TFA they're talking about how the 17 is new.
Yeah.
So in Rogue they're talking about how the 15 is getting phased out.
We've got a whole elaborate
Yeah.
timeline to this thing.
Can't wait to hear about the 18s.
Yeah,
it's
no.
going to be great.
That's
It's gonna
got to
really
be
cool.
in Ep 8, I guess.
I want to
The
listen.
18,
I want to know about the one.
the one.
The one.
BT1.
That's the Han Solo story. We're going to hear that.
One day.
Something that made me really happy, I might have squealed like a schoolgirl when I saw him on screen, was Ponda Baba. We had Ponda Baba and Dr. Evazan in the Jeddah Market. Was that something that...
It was in the script
It
early
was in
on.
the script
yeah.
early on, and
Yeah.
every time it showed up in the script, I always circled like, "Are we really doing this?" 'Cause
Yes, you are doing it.
The
It's
funny thing is,
awesome.
I thought, "Oh, is this really going to work?" And then I saw it in an early cut, and I could not stop laughing. But it's funny, a lot of people are asking, "Well, how did they leave?" It's like, the same way they got there, on a ship. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, there's a bunch of time in between that encounter and when what happens to Jeddah happens to Jeddah. So there's
It's just a
plenty
really
of time.
rough week
Right, so
for
it's like,
the.
it's like probably like a day.
Well, they have to. Everyone has to walk from Jeddah City to Saw's compound, and that's like 10 miles.
That's a long
so
walk.
that's plenty of time for them to leave.
And all the
get into
Imperials
trouble.
got off.
Yeah, exactly. So they're safe and sound, destined to get an arm cut off, and whatever else happens. So.
That's actually one of my favorite things. If you watch Rogue One, Ponda like holds it back.
holds it back,
And I'm
yeah.
like, oh, he's not going to have that arm much longer.
Exactly. Now you understand.
See, I always liked it because Ponda's like, no, man, not worth it. Don't pick that fight. Like,
When the next
You're
fight
gonna
is
get
blamed
hurt.
on him.
Yeah,
Because
see?
he doesn't like you.
If I had my druthers, I would have had Gareth shoot it twice with different hands
Yeah.
on Ponda Baba, and then just cut them so that you have that same error that's in Episode 4, where his hands just change from shot to shot.
Weird
which drives people like nuts.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
It's like, just do it. Just do it.
So we're going werewolf hands from now on,
I
right?
think so. That's what hits the ground.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so maybe he's wearing oven mitts during the beginning of the scene, and they fall off
Yeah.
when they pick the fights, just like a hockey. Throws off the oven mitts.
All
He
right,
actually has just a bunch of different ones. He throws off on all the fights he gets
Yeah,
in.
there you go. Another sort of cameo appearances of classic characters were Gold Leader and Red Leader.
You guys were at the premiere, and you guys hear the
That got
cheers.
the biggest cheer
Yeah,
in the
amazing.
entire
It did.
theater.
People loved seeing those guys again. And it was quite a piece of work to get that to happen. It was always kind of sketched like, wouldn't it be great if we could find a way to get these guys in this movie? So what they did is they went up to the film archives and found footage that was not used in A New Hope of a Red Leader and Gold Leader. And it required quite a bit of cleanup and modification in order to fit the aesthetic of Rogue One. Not only that, so they found some alternate takes. They had like Red Leader asking about Red 5, which was originally meant to be a scene where Luke flies off course. So they changed it to be this new poor guy who gets blasted to pieces. And for Gold Leader, they actually got Angus McInnes, who was the original actor who played Gold Leader, to record new dialogue. Which is like pretty seamless because he starts off saying what we think is a classic A New Hope line, saying he's about to start his attack run, and then the dialogue continues saying on the shield gate.
Yeah.
And it cuts away so you don't realize that this is brand new dialogue coming out of his mouth.
that's really cool that they were able to use unused vintage footage. It just looked so seamless.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of it out there. That's the tricky thing. George was so economical. Everyone knows the story about how, there wasn't enough footage to extend the Tusken Raider pumping up his arms, so they run that forward and backwards. Like, there's not a huge trove of unseen A New Hope outtakes. So we were very lucky to find these little pieces of Red and Gold Leader.
Really?
I think that's one of the reasons George loves this movie is that it just takes risks. It's just like, no, you know what? We're going to do this.
And a lot of fans were worried that it wasn't going to reference the prequels as much as
No,
they
it's
would like.
absolutely part of the
Look
history.
at the turbo tank and
Yeah, the turbo tank
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
nice touch. The very first shot of it on Wobani is like so great, just cresting that that mud hill. And it totally makes sense. Like, you realize that the attack truck from the last war is now being used to ship prisoners because it's so outdated. This is what it's being pressed to do these days. And then we do see Coruscant outside the windows of the Urso apartment. That scene basically inspires a scene that's in Catalyst. So you can imagine that that's the moment that Jyn is remembering. That's actually in the book. There's one really obscure Easter egg that's probably only appreciated by 5 or 6 people in the world, and it's the
Four
fact.
of which are in this room.
Yeah. And the fact that we have General Ramadi as a character in this, which is like, who?
Which
But
was General Ramadi?
yeah, he's the guy who comes up to Tarkin and tells him about the situation on Scarif and all this stuff. And believe it or not, the production crew took a look at everyone who was seated around the Death Star conference table, aside from Vader and Tarkin, of course, and started earmarking who are characters
And
that
some
we
you
can,
only see from the back of their heads.
who can we recast to have a presence in this movie? So they looked at Mahdi, they looked at Tag, they looked at all these people, and it turns out they found a guy who looks just like this really obscure, blurry photo character. So this guy comes to the table with a full name, a rank, and a backstory, and it's like nobody, like, flies over everyone's head, but there he is. So for
In Star Wars, there's more than one empty chair in that scene, right?
yeah, that's true. There's like
One
a
saying,
couple.
like, this empty chair was Krennic's. Well, you know what? There's a couple of empty chairs.
But one of those empty chairs is almost certainly
most likely Krennic's, yeah. And that's the thing. It's like when Mahdi and Tag are arguing in Ep4, and he's saying, you know, the Rebel Alliance is too well equipped. Well, you know, to your Starfleet, but not to this battle station. They're talking about the Battle of Scarif. Yeah. You know, it's like that was
They
the
just took
first
down two Star
Destroyers
Destroyers.
and the Shield Gate. But they attacked the Pentagon essentially. Yeah. So that was a huge moment, and that's what that conversation came out of. So these were like a lot of these points in A New Hope that we had to craft Rogue One to conform with and attach to. The notion that several transmissions were sent to the rebels. That's why when Jyn plugs in the data tape and starts transmitting, it's broken up into pieces, because even though she's only sending one thing, it had to be broken up into several transmissions.
And it's a data tape.
Yeah.
But then the card that she inserts into R2-D2 is the card that they transfer it.
Let's talk a little bit about the Guardians of the Wills. So if you can give like a background and, you know, what that order means, I guess, it'd be cool.
Well, it's still something, more information is going to come out because we're not done talking about them as a subject. But the name Wills is like one of the very first things George Lucas ever wrote about Star Wars. And his thought was that Star Wars itself is being brought to us, presented to us mere mortals on the planet Earth from some other tome that he had access to. And that tome was the Journal of the Wills. And so it was never really specified who the Wills were. They were just this larger than life concept that was all-knowing and had the position in the universe to be able to tell these stories.
And then in Revenge of the Sith, we almost got a greater reference to it. Qui-Gon Jinn learns the ability to manifest himself through the Force in the afterlife from the Wills.
Yeah, the shaman of the Wills is who taught him that. Whether or not that shaman is the same, related to, or different than the Force priestesses we see in Clone Wars, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. But yeah, the idea of the Wills has been kicking around for a long time.
The Force of Others line kind of connects into that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, the very first incarnation of May the Force be with you, and the Force in the early George Lucas scripts were the Force of Others. That's what it was called.
So,
Ties us
yeah,
minds together.
exactly. You hear Chirrut kind of mumbling that, and that's one of my favorite lines. That I'm surprised more people
May the
haven't.
force of others be with you.
Yeah, I'm
I
surprised
liked
more
that.
people haven't picked up on that.
In general, there's a lot of little Easter eggs. There's, you know, you got blue milk on the counter of the Urso homestead. You've got the moisture evaporators. Jyn's toys are all sorts of stuff. She's got like a Lothcat Tuca doll. And
Does she really have a laugh?
she does.
Really?
Yeah.
There's two Tucas, isn't
There's
there?
two Tucas, yeah. There's one that's more traditionally star-shaped, like we first met them in Clone Wars, and then there's one that's more cat-like. So the prop department on Rogue really had a lot of fun pulling from the entire history of Star Wars and dressing up the universe the way they did.
Well, even more recently, I think it was a cool parallel to have her with her Stormtrooper doll, and Rey had her Rebel pilot doll.
Well, that's because they're mother and daughter, right?
Yeah, totally.
You can't say that.
No, they're not. They're not.
All right. I just so happen to have a list of frequently asked questions here that we will
boy.
refer
That's
to.
convenient.
I know. It's like I prepared or something. So probably a big one that you guys have gotten a lot of is, what was the Tana before doing at Scarif? Why was Leia there?
Yeah, so I mean, Leia was always on Yavin, but she was off camera because we didn't want to we wanted to save that.
But
reveal
we
to
have
the end.
R2D2 and C3PO there, so that's your
R2D2
first
are there.
indication that,
yeah,
you know.
she's there. We hear Antilles being mentioned, so she's there.
I had assumed that they were there because Bale was there.
Yeah, well, and she's a key member of the Rebel Alliance, right? Leia is like the public face of their cause, but she hasn't outed herself as a member of the Rebel Alliance. She's been using her coverage as a senator to get them all the things that Bale used to do when he was senator. As the story was in development, the plan was always that Leia was gonna go to Tatooine to pick up, Obi-Wan, and Raddus was gonna escort her. So that's like, they were all gonna go together. And then the news about Scarif came in, and that was deemed more important.
And the ride just, we're
Right,
going to
we're
They
doing
were
this
rerouted.
first, Well, because it's the one warship that they have at this point, which is the Profundity, which is Raddus's ship. We even added a little line in the novelization that the Tanavi was undergoing some degree of repair, so it's kind of stuck in that ship for a while until it can get out.
Which is why it can't engage into the battle.
Right. And anyway, it's a consular ship. You don't want to have that in a battle at that point. And also, the one power that ship has is its status as a consular ship, because it's basically like having diplomatic plates. Like you can't mess with it.
Okay.
In theory, until Vader says, "All right, I'm done pretending that I care about the Senate. You're going to jail," kind of thing.
And that makes Leia's whole "this is a consular ship, we're on a diplomatic mission" line even that much more daring of her to lie.
But it's always been that dynamic. Like, let's take Scarif off the table. Leia's ship is firing back at a Star Destroyer. Her crew attacks an Imperial team that boards that ship. No matter what,
They're already in decline.
Leia's card of I'm a senator is like pretty shaky ground. And of course, Vader doesn't buy it.
Right.
Like you could take the fact that does he recognize the ship? Did he see it depart? Even if you don't have that, the fact that she's firing back and resisting, if Vader's the police, he's saying pull over.
Right.
And Leia's not pulling over. And yes, it's pronounced Tanavi.
Tanavi. I know
That's from the old radio drama. It doesn't look like it's spelled that way, but that's what we've been
I think
saying.
that's one of the first things I ever learned from you. Might have been. Okay, here's one that I've seen a lot. Why is the Death Star upside down over Jeddah? Because space.
It's space. It's space.
Upside down in space.
There's no upside down.
So can you give us like a little Cliff's Notes version, a little idiot's guide to
Well, look at it.
perspective?
Imagine if instead of Jeddah, it was blowing up. Sorry, Australia. It was blowing up Australia. In other words, something on the southern continent, right? Mm-hmm. So rather than having the Death Star fly all the way to the southern, it's just that's the way it arrived, and it's going to target on the horizon what it's going to shoot. And so it just so happens it's that Jeddah is upside down from the Death Star perspective.
There's no up in space.
No, they're not sticking to the ceiling or anything like that. Also, it just makes a cool looking shot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're used to seeing it when it's not in any sort of firing position. Like, it doesn't matter where the super laser is when you're not aiming at something. But if you're going to destroy something, you need to point it at that something.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Mustafar?
Yes, it was Mustafar.
Then why wasn't it labeled?
Well, the way I've heard it is that the filmmakers didn't want to spoil who we were about to meet before we meet him.
It was really fun
Vader.
seeing all the speculation when the trailer came out, like who was in that back to tank and why do they have red royal guards and
And who's that guy
kneeling?
Obviously, it's Snoke, right?
Obviously. Did Galen Erso engineer the faulty thermal exhaust port?
Not specifically, or else he would have said so in the message. He built an unstable reactor. And it turns out there is a weakness there, but how do you exploit it? In fact, that's what General Tagg says in the big board meeting aboard the Death Star. It's like if the rebels found the plans, they might find a weakness. They might, so.
that's a pretty crucial bit of information to leave out if he had done that.
If he said, like, go here, and then hit that. It's like, no. He knows that there's a way to do it, or there must be a way to do it. And in fact, in the novel, we get the notion that he signed off on the general design plan for these thermal exhaust ports. But he still doesn't have a specific piece of information to pass on beyond go get the plans. Because if you get the plans, then you'll find out how to do it.
Because he didn't build the Death Star.
Yeah.
That wasn't his job, so he doesn't know necessarily how to get from point A to point B. He just knows that point B is
So specifically,
dangerous.
I mean, he was working on specifically the reactor. He studies
The
like
cannon,
yeah.
and how it connects to the reactor, and that's the point
what
of weakness.
powers
power.
Yeah.
Why did the first Death Star take 20 years to build while the second one didn't?
Yeah, that's just it. It didn't take 20 years, and the plan was never for it to take 20 years. It took 20 years to get working. It took 20 years to get finally that right combination to make a sustainable blast out of that super laser. So that super laser that we see getting plugged in, who knows what version number that is, but that's the final one. They got it working. Once they figure that out, go ahead, build us another one.
Thank you guys for coming by and talking and outlining all of these fun little details. I'm going to go see Rogue One again and look for the rest of these little Easter eggs that I've missed. And so should you. Go see Rogue One again and then come back here later this month when the Star Wars show returns.